Elijah Reynolds stood frozen as 5 police guns aimed at his chest on his own manicured lawn. The property deed in his office meant nothing now. Blood trickled from his temple where Officer Brennan had struck him. Little did these officers know their careers would end tonight. Elijah's FBI badge lay just inside alongside something far more dangerous. Before we dive into this shocking story of injustice and vindication, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you've ever witnessed or experienced profiling, and subscribe to join our community fighting for justice. What would you do if armed officers suddenly invaded your property? Let's find out how Elijah handled this life-threatening situation. Elijah Reynolds had spent 15 years building his reputation at the Federal Bureau of Investigation, becoming one of the most respected special agents specializing in police corruption cases. At 39 years old, with degrees from Howard University and Harvard Law School, he had finally saved enough to purchase his dream home in the prestigious Westlake Estates neighborhood of Atlanta. The 5-bedroom colonial, with its manicured 3-acre lot, represented everything he had worked for since growing up in a small apartment in South Chicago. The purchase hadn't been easy, taking 3 months of rejected applications, despite his excellent 820 credit score and substantial down payment. 4 different real estate agents had mysteriously stopped returning his calls after showing him properties in Westlake Estates. The 5th agent, Melissa Garcia, had finally been straightforward with him. "Look, I shouldn't tell you this, but there hasn't been a black family in this section of Westlake. Some agents are getting pressure not to facilitate those sales." Elijah had thanked her for her honesty and doubled down on his efforts, eventually finding a seller who cared more about his above-asking price offer than the color of his skin. Moving day should have been triumphant, but instead it became his first taste of the neighborhood's true character. As the moving truck pulled up to the elegant brick home with white columns, Elijah noticed curtains moving in windows across the street. By the time the movers had unloaded half his furniture, an older white man with military posture was photographing his license plate and the moving truck. When Elijah approached him with an extended hand, the man had turned away without speaking. By evening, 3 neighbors had come by, not with welcome baskets, but with clipboards. Walter Sullivan, a silver-haired man in his 60s who introduced himself as the Homeowners Association president, immediately cited Elijah for the moving truck being parked partially on the street, a violation of HOA rules. "We maintain standards here," Sullivan had said, handing over a $50 fine notice without making eye contact. Within the first week, Elijah discovered cameras installed on the house directly across from his, all pointed at his property. His careful examination of the HOA bylaws showed no restrictions against his modest landscaping changes, yet he received violation notices for each improvement. The only neighbors who showed any warmth were the Millers, a younger couple with 2 small children who brought over homemade cookies and genuine smiles. "Don't mind the old guard," Sarah Miller had said quietly. "They'll adjust eventually." Elijah doubted this, but appreciated their kindness. His FBI career had prepared him for hostility. As one of only 27 black agents in his training class of 150 at Quantico, he'd faced similar resistance. Over 15 years, he'd built an impressive record investigating civil rights violations and police corruption, earning commendations from 2 FBI directors and the respect of colleagues who initially doubted him. This house represented his personal victory over systemic obstacles. He designed one room, specifically, as a secure home office with reinforced doors and specialized locks to protect sensitive case files when he worked from home. The house sat on a corner lot, providing excellent sightlines in all directions, a security feature that had appealed to his professional instincts. Within days, he'd memorized his neighbors' routines. Directly across the street lived Gerald Jenkins, a retired police chief who spent mornings washing his car and afternoons watching Elijah's house from his porch. Next door were the Thompsons, who immediately installed a 6-foot fence along their shared property line after Elijah moved in. Sullivan lived 3 houses down his pristine lawn, adorned with American flags and security company signs. Elijah installed his own security system, including visible cameras and several hidden ones recording everything to secure cloud storage only he could access. The first neighborhood association meeting had been enlightening. Entering the community center conversations had immediately stopped. He'd been directed to sit in the back row while others clustered in familiar groups. During the 2-hour meeting, his raised hand was ignored, until the very end, when his question about repainting his mailbox was met with a lengthy explanation of the approval process that apparently applied only to his property. As Elijah drove home that night, his phone rang. The FBI deputy director needed him in Washington immediately for consultation on a corruption case involving Atlanta area law enforcement. "We've got a situation brewing that matches your expertise," the deputy director explained. "I need your eyes on this now. Can you fly out tonight?" Elijah agreed, unaware that his 3-day absence would set in motion events that would transform both his career and his troubled neighborhood forever. After 3 intensive days consulting at FBI headquarters in Washington, Elijah returned to Atlanta on a late flight, reaching his Westlake Estates home at 9:30 on a Thursday evening. Exhausted from hours of analyzing evidence of police corruption in several metropolitan departments, he looked forward to sleeping in his own bed. What he didn't know was that during his absence, the Neighborhood Watch Group had been actively discussing him in their private messaging group. Jenkins, the retired police chief, had started a thread titled "New Resident Surveillance." Elijah's hidden security system had captured and archived all the Neighborhood Watch messages automatically. "Anyone know where the new guy in 412 Oakwood went? Haven't seen him in 3 days. Probably fled. Background check shows something suspicious. My cousin at Atlanta PD says the address purchase records don't add up. Could be using the house for something illegal. No one affords this neighborhood with a government salary. I've organized additional patrol through my contacts at the precinct. Keep eyes open." Jenkins had indeed reached out to former colleagues now working in the local police district, including Sergeant Victor Conrad, known for aggressive enforcement in minority neighborhoods. Elijah's security cameras had recorded 2 slow cruises by patrol cars during his absence. More troubling was footage from 9:15 that evening, showing Jenkins on his phone while watching Elijah enter through his back door with his suitcase having parked in his garage. The call connected to the non-emergency police line, where Jenkins reported seeing an unknown black male breaking into 412 Oakwood through the rear entrance. The dispatcher's response had been immediate. "Units are already in the area, sir. We'll send someone to investigate." Officers Derek Brennan and Jason Miller received the call as they patrolled 3 blocks away. Brennan, a stocky officer with 8 years on the force and 6 civilian complaints for excessive force, responded immediately. "Possible break-in at 412 Oakwood." Responding. What Elijah couldn't know was that these officers belonged to a special enforcement unit under Sergeant Conrad that had been the subject of an internal affairs investigation twice in the past year, both times cleared despite substantial evidence of racial profiling. More significantly, this unit was part of a larger pattern of enforcement that the specialized FBI task force Elijah secretly led had been investigating for months. The task force had already compiled evidence of systematic civil rights violations across 3 precincts, with Conrad's unit displaying particularly troubling patterns. Unaware of the approaching storm, Elijah changed into comfortable clothes and went to his backyard to install additional security lighting, a project he'd planned before his sudden trip to Washington. The warm Atlanta night was peaceful as he worked methodically, testing the motion sensors and adjusting the light angles to eliminate blind spots near his property line. From their vantage point half a block away, officers Brennan and Miller observed Elijah working in his yard. "Subject appears to be tampering with security equipment," Brennan reported into his radio, "possibly disabling systems before associates arrive." No evidence supported this interpretation, but Sergeant Conrad's response came quickly. "Approach with caution. These burglary rings are getting sophisticated. Additional units en route." Elijah's phone rang as he finished adjusting the final light. It was Maya Chen, his partner on the FBI task force. "How was the flight?" she asked. The usual, Elijah replied, keeping their conversation deliberately casual, as he always did on unsecured lines. "Did you get that package I sent to the office?" The innocuous question was their code for asking if new evidence had arrived in their ongoing investigation. "Came in this afternoon," Maya confirmed. "You'll want to see it first thing tomorrow. Connect some interesting dots about those officers we've been looking at. I'll be there early." Elijah promised, unaware that as they spoke, officers Brennan and Miller were developing an approach strategy, calling in 2 additional patrol cars for backup. Jenkins watched from across the street as the officers positioned their vehicles strategically, one blocking each potential exit route from Elijah's property. Through his earpiece, Brennan received instructions from Conrad. "Remember, these suspects are typically armed. Secure the scene decisively." The radio crackled with another officer's voice. "Be advised, property records show owner as Reynolds Elijah. No current wants or warrants." Conrad's response was immediate. Records can be falsified. Proceed as planned. Subject matches description of break-in suspect. Elijah noticed the patrol cars but continued his work, refusing to be intimidated in his own yard. He'd experienced this type of surveillance before and knew his rights. His security cameras recorded the officers' conversation as they prepared to approach. "How do you want to play this?" Miller asked. "Standard procedure for unknown armed suspect," Brennan replied. "He's on private property without clear authorization. Failure to comply justifies whatever force is necessary." Roger, that came the response from the other units now positioning at the property boundaries. Moving into position now. The tactical formation was immediate and overwhelming. 4 police cruisers blocking Elijah's driveway and side yard access, positioned to prevent any possible escape route, their headlights creating harsh spotlights that illuminated his property with blinding intensity. 8 officers emerged simultaneously, weapons drawn, using their vehicle doors as shields, in a response formation typically reserved for armed and dangerous suspects. "Police, don't move, hands where we can see them." Officer Brennan shouted, his service weapon aimed directly at Elijah's chest from a distance of approximately 15 feet. Elijah immediately raised his hands, the security light still in his left palm, and responded with practiced calm. "Officers, this is my home. I'm the homeowner, Elijah Reynolds." His training had prepared him for this moment, knowing that sudden movements could escalate an already volatile situation. Officer Brennan advanced aggressively, weapon still raised. "Shut up. On your knees now. Hands behind your head." The command was delivered with unnecessary volume and hostility, despite Elijah's clear compliance. "I'm complying, but I need to inform you that this is my property. My identification is in my back pocket," Elijah stated clearly, beginning to lower himself to his knees while maintaining eye contact. Before he could fully comply, Officer Miller flanked him from the left, roughly grabbing his arm and forcing him downward, causing Elijah to drop the security light, which shattered on the stone patio. "I said on the ground now," Brennan shouted again despite Elijah's obvious compliance. "My wallet contains my driver's license with this address. I have the legal right to be on my own property," Elijah continued calmly, his FBI training evident in his measured response to the escalating situation. Officer Brennan moved forward rapidly, holstering his weapon, only to deliver a sharp knee strike to Elijah's back, forcing him face down onto the patio stones. "Stop resisting," Brennan yelled, though security footage would later show no resistance whatsoever. As handcuffs were roughly applied, tightened to the point of pain, Brennan leaned close to Elijah's ear and whispered, "You people never learn which neighborhoods to stay out of." The racial implication was unmistakable. Elijah's FBI training activated his situational awareness, mentally recording every violation for future documentation, while his tactical watch, disguised as a normal timepiece, captured audio of the entire encounter. Neighbors began gathering on the street, several recording the incident on cell phones, while others engaged in animated conversations with the officers securing the perimeter. Walter Sullivan arrived, pointing dramatically toward Elijah's prone form. "I told you he doesn't belong here. I've been saying it since he moved in," his voice carrying clearly across the property. Officer Miller roughly searched Elijah's pockets without consent or probable cause, extracting his wallet and phone. The search revealed Elijah's FBI credentials in a concealed compartment of his wallet, causing momentary hesitation. "Look at this fake ID," Brennan announced loudly, holding up the federal badge and identification card. "Pretty good quality, might add, impersonating a federal officer to the charges. That's my legitimate FBI identification. I'm a special agent with the Bureau. You can verify my identity by calling the Atlanta field office," Elijah stated firmly, blood now trickling from his forehead, where it had impacted the stone patio during the takedown. "Right, and I'm the director." Brennan laughed, pocketing the credentials rather than attempting verification. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The Miranda warning continued as Elijah lay bleeding on his own property, his constitutional rights systematically violated despite perfect compliance. "I want my lawyer present for any questioning, and I formally request that you contact FBI Assistant Director Thomas Wright immediately," Elijah stated clearly, invoking his rights with specific language that any law enforcement officer should recognize as a formal legal request. "You can call whoever you want from jail," Brennan responded dismissively, making no effort to honor the request. Jenkins approached from across the street, engaging Officers Miller and Brennan, in a hushed conversation just beyond the property line. "I've been watching this house for weeks," Jenkins informed them with unwarranted authority. "Suspicious vehicles, unusual hours, definitely not normal homeowner behavior." His statement was offered and accepted as fact, despite his clear bias and lack of legitimate investigative standing. "I'm warning you, officers. You are currently violating the civil rights of a federal agent under color of authority," Elijah stated clearly, his voice steady, despite his compromised position. "This encounter is being recorded, and continued detention, without verification of my identity, constitutes a serious violation of federal law." Officer Brennan responded by roughly pulling Elijah to his feet by the handcuffs, causing immediate pain in his shoulders. "Keep making threats. See how that works out for you." The situation continued to deteriorate as more officers arrived, creating a scene of overwhelming force against a single compliant individual whose only crime was existing on his own property while black. Have you ever witnessed racial profiling firsthand? Comment number 1. If you believe police should verify a person's identity before escalating to physical force. Or number 2, if you think officers were justified in their aggressive approach. Like this video if you support accountability for civil rights violations and subscribe to follow Elijah's fight for justice. Will Elijah's FBI credentials make any difference to these officers, or will they continue their unlawful invasion of his home? And what evidence might Elijah's hidden security system be capturing that could turn this entire situation upside down? Let's continue to the next part of this shocking true story. With Elijah still handcuffed and bleeding, Officers Brennan and Miller proceeded to force entry into his home without a warrant, kicking open the front door, despite Elijah's explicit denial of consent and clear statement that they were violating his Fourth Amendment rights. "We've got reasonable suspicion of criminal activity and possible accomplices inside," Brennan announced loudly, creating a justification for the illegal entry that was captured by both his body camera and Elijah's security system. 4 officers entered with weapons drawn, moving through the house in a tactical formation, typically reserved for high-risk warrant executions, not investigative stops of compliant subjects. From his position handcuffed to the porch railing where Brennan had secured him, Elijah could hear the sounds of his possessions being roughly handled and furniture being moved. "Be careful with those items. Some are evidence in active federal cases," he called out, attempting to prevent the contamination of sensitive materials. His warning was met with mocking laughter from Officer Miller, who had remained outside to guard him. "Sure they are. What are you investigating, the price of crack in Atlanta?" The racial stereotype was delivered with casual cruelty, loud enough for the gathering neighbors to hear. Inside, the officers were conducting a destructive search, pulling books from shelves, emptying drawers onto the floor, and treating valuable possessions with deliberate carelessness. An antique vase that had belonged to Elijah's grandmother crashed to the floor as Officer Williams swept it from a side table, the shattering sound clearly audible outside. "Oops," Williams called out, followed by more laughter. Sergeant Victor Conrad arrived 20 minutes into the search, parking his unmarked police vehicle directly on Elijah's manicured lawn, crushing carefully tended flower beds beneath its tires. Rather than assessing the situation or questioning the aggressive tactics, Conrad immediately joined the search, directing officers to be thorough rather than addressing the escalating constitutional violations. "Check everything. These guys are getting creative with hiding places," Conrad instructed, his voice carrying from inside. Elijah remained composed, mentally documenting each violation while blood from his temple wound soaked into the collar of his shirt. The public humiliation was clearly intentional, with neighbors gathering to watch his degradation. Sullivan stood at the edge of the property with open satisfaction, occasionally making comments to other residents that reinforced the narrative that Elijah didn't belong in Westlake Estates. The search intensified when officers discovered Elijah's home office, where his FBI credentials, awards, and case files were prominently displayed. Despite this clear evidence of his identity, Conrad emerged from the house holding a framed FBI commendation. "Nice forgery. Did you print this yourself? Or pay someone?" he questioned deliberately, dropping the frame on the porch where the glass shattered near Elijah's feet. "That is authentic federal property you're damaging," Elijah responded evenly, along with interfering with an active federal investigation. "I'm giving you one more opportunity to contact the FBI field office to verify my identity before these violations become irreversible." Conrad laughed, leaning close to Elijah's face. You know how many criminals claim to be cops or feds when they get caught. Your fake ID doesn't impress me. When he turned away, Conrad muttered under his breath, "Uppity bastard thinks he's someone important." Inside, officers were photographing documents clearly marked as FBI property, some containing sensitive information about ongoing investigations. Officer Brennan held up a family photo showing Elijah with the FBI director at an awards ceremony. "Photoshop is amazing these days," he commented to Officer Williams, who was rifling through Elijah's desk drawers. "Guys like this think a good enough costume makes them untouchable." After 45 minutes of the illegal search, Conrad finally instructed Officer Miller to make a verification call. But rather than contacting the FBI field office as requested, he called a desk sergeant at their own precinct. "Hey Jim, got a guy here claiming to be FBI. Last name Reynolds, first name Elijah. Says he's assigned to Atlanta field office." The deliberate delay tactic was obvious to Elijah, who remained silent, allowing the officers to accumulate additional violations that would later strengthen the case against them. The blood from Elijah's head wound had now dried, leaving a visible trail down his face and neck, staining his light blue shirt with a rusty pattern that would later appear in evidence photographs. From across the street, Jenkins had been joined by several other neighbors, including Sullivan, all watching with evident satisfaction. "Told you something wasn't right about him," Jenkins said loudly enough for Elijah to hear. "Nobody like him affords a house in this neighborhood legally." Officer Williams emerged from the house carrying Elijah's laptop and external hard drives. Found these hidden in a compartment under his desk. "Probably full of stolen financial data," he announced, though the hidden compartment was simply a standard desk drawer. "Those contained classified federal information," Elijah stated firmly. "Removing them from secure storage is a federal offense." Conrad approached again, standing uncomfortably close to Elijah. "Keep throwing around federal offenses. See how that works out for you when we find what you're really hiding." The officers' body cameras continued recording, capturing every violation and inappropriate comment, unbeknownst to them creating irrefutable evidence of misconduct. Similarly, Elijah's hidden security system was documenting everything from multiple angles, including areas where officers believed they weren't being observed. In one such corner of the kitchen, caught only by Elijah's concealed camera, officers Brennan and Williams engaged in a hushed conversation. "If we don't find anything, we could always make sure we do." Brennan suggested patting his pocket meaningfully. The implication of planting evidence was clear and captured in high definition. Elijah, drawing on his extensive knowledge of police procedures, began to subtly unnerve the officers. "Officer Brennan, your body camera appears to be functioning properly. The blinking green light indicates active recording with cloud backup." Brennan instinctively looked down at his camera, momentary concern crossing his face. "And Sergeant Conrad, department policy requires supervising officers to file an incident justification report within 4 hours of any forced entry without warrant. The timestamp on this incident began 47 minutes ago." These specific references to internal procedures caused visible discomfort among the officers, though they attempted to maintain their aggressive posture. Using his tactical watch, Elijah had already activated an emergency distress signal monitored by the FBI security team, sending his precise location and an alert code indicating an agent in distress. Standard protocol would bring FBI response within 30 minutes, but the officers remained unaware of the approaching reckoning. Assistant Chief Robert Wilson arrived on scene, his unmarked vehicle parking beside Conrad's on Elijah's lawn. Wilson, a tall man with silver hair and an imposing presence, immediately took charge of the scene. "What have we got?" he asked Conrad, not bothering to address Elijah directly, despite his visible injuries and restrained position. "Suspected burglar, possibly identity thief. Claims to be FBI, but documentation looks suspicious." Conrad reported the body cameras capturing his deliberate mischaracterization of the situation. Wilson gave Elijah a dismissive glance before nodding to Conrad. "Keep searching. If he's here illegally, I want everything documented." The violations continued to accumulate as Wilson's presence provided higher-ranking authorization for the misconduct already in progress, creating a chain of command responsibility that would later prove crucial to the case building in real time around them. The atmosphere shifted dramatically when Sergeant Conrad's phone rang with an unknown Washington, D.C. number appearing on the screen. Answering with professional formality, Conrad's expression transformed from confident authority to confused concern as the voice on the other end identified itself. "This is FBI Director Patrick Morgan. I understand you're currently detaining one of my agents, Special Agent Elijah Reynolds." The director's authoritative tone carried clearly in the sudden silence that had fallen across the scene. Conrad stammered, "Sir, we're responding to a potential break-in reported by neighbors." The subject presented identification claiming federal employment, but we haven't verified. Director Morgan cut him off sharply. That verification could have been accomplished with a single phone call to our Atlanta field office. Instead, you've detained a federal agent conducting official business, searched his home without warrant, and apparently caused him physical injury based on the alert we received. Conrad's face paled visibly as the implications became clear. "We're following standard procedure for suspicious persons, sir. Your procedures involve bloodying federal agents on their own property," the director responded. "Agent Reynolds leads our Civil Rights Division's Special Task Force on Police Misconduct. Every moment of your interaction is being recorded from multiple angles. I suggest you immediately remove his restraints and provide medical attention." Officer Brennan moved quickly to remove Elijah's handcuffs, his previously aggressive demeanor evaporating into nervous efficiency. As the cuffs came off, Elijah remained perfectly composed, rubbing his wrists slowly to restore circulation while maintaining unwavering eye contact with Assistant Chief Wilson. "Thank you for the call," Director Elijah said calmly, knowing the conversation was on speaker. "I'll provide a full report of tonight's events within the hour." Without waiting for permission, Elijah walked deliberately toward his front door, Officers Brennan and Miller stepping aside quickly to clear his path. Inside his home, the destruction was extensive. Furniture overturned, personal items scattered across floors, and clear evidence of a search that far exceeded any reasonable scope. Elijah turned to face the officers who had followed him inside, his demeanor shifting subtly from compliant suspect to commanding federal authority. "Officers, please remain exactly where you are. Your body cameras contain evidence relevant to an active federal investigation. Any attempt to disable or tamper with that evidence will constitute obstruction of justice." Several officers instinctively reached toward their cameras before stopping themselves, the gesture itself captured by Elijah's security system. From the front yard, Conrad and Wilson engaged in a hushed conversation that Elijah's exterior cameras recorded clearly. "We need to contain this immediately," Wilson urged. "Get those body cameras offline before they upload to the server." Conrad nodded. "I'll call tech services to interrupt the upload cycle." Their conversation continued, unaware of the comprehensive surveillance, capturing their conspiracy in real time. Elijah moved to his home office, retrieving a secure phone from a hidden compartment that the searching officers had missed. Maya execution phase activated. Westlake primary location compromised. Deploy response team Alpha to my residence immediately. His coded message to Agent Maya Chen initiated a predetermined FBI response protocol. Returning to the main room where the officers stood uncertainly, Elijah addressed them with quiet authority. "Gentlemen, you should be aware that tonight's events have been monitored under FBI Operation Code 5628, an investigation into systematic civil rights violations by law enforcement in this jurisdiction." Brennan's face showed momentary confusion before hardening into defiance. "We were responding to a legitimate call about suspicious activity. A call from retired Chief Jenkins, who has been under federal surveillance for orchestrating false reports targeting minority residents," Elijah countered smoothly. His communication with Officer Conrad earlier today discussed creating a pretext for tonight's operation. Conrad's shock at this precise information confirmed its accuracy. Officer Miller attempted to leave the scene, only to find FBI agent Maya Chen and 4 tactical team members entering through the front door, their FBI windbreakers and credentials prominently displayed. "All officers will remain on site," Chen announced firmly. "By order of the Department of Justice, this is now a federal crime scene." Outside, Wilson was attempting to access the patrol car's digital video recorders when 2 FBI technicians intercepted him. Assistant Chief Wilson, "Tampering with evidence in a federal investigation is a felony one," stated, firmly positioning himself between Wilson and the vehicles. "All recording devices are now under federal protection." The neighbors who had gathered to watch Elijah's humiliation began quickly dispersing as FBI vehicles with flashing lights arrived, creating a very different spectacle than they had anticipated. Jenkins attempted to retreat to his home across the street, but found his path blocked by 2 FBI agents. "Mr. Jenkins, please remain available for questioning regarding your false police report." Sullivan similarly found himself approached by federal agents documenting the Homeowners Association's systematic harassment campaign. Within 30 minutes, the power dynamic had completely reversed, with local officers standing uncomfortably in Elijah's living room while federal agents processed the scene methodically. Using a secure satellite phone, Elijah contacted FBI Assistant Director Lawrence Thompson. Sir, primary insertion has yielded expected results. Subjects Conrad Wilson, Brennan, and Miller have provided actionable evidence exactly as anticipated. Jenkins and Sullivan activated the neighborhood response protocol precisely as intelligence suggested they would. His calm report revealed a stunning truth to the officers listening in growing horror. Elijah's presence in the neighborhood had never been coincidental, but rather a carefully orchestrated operation targeting suspected corruption. Secondary phase authorized, the assistant director's voice confirmed. Full team deployment approved. Elijah nodded to Agent Chen, who immediately began directing the expanded operation with practiced efficiency. Document everything, she instructed the FBI evidence team, now photographing Elijah's injuries and the damage to his home. Every officer's body camera footage is to be secured before they leave the premises. The following 24 hours transformed the quiet Westlake Estates into the epicenter of a massive federal corruption investigation, as Elijah Reynolds, now clearly in command, directed operations from his restored home office. FBI evidence response teams meticulously documented every aspect of the previous night's violations, while specialized interrogation experts conducted separate interviews with each involved officer. Officer Brennan, explain the departmental policy that authorized your use of force against a compliant subject who identified himself as a homeowner. Special Agent Marcus Torres, questioned in a recorded interview conducted in a temporary pod set up in Elijah's driveway. It was, standard procedure for unknown suspects. Brennan responded, his confidence evaporating under professional questioning. Can you cite the specific policy number that authorizes striking a compliant subject in the head? Torres continued, placing photographs of Elijah's injuries on the table between them. I thought he was reaching for something, Brennan claimed, contradicting both body camera evidence and witness statements. Similar interviews conducted simultaneously with officers Miller Williams and others revealed a pattern of coordinated misconduct that extended far beyond a single incident. In the command center established in Elijah's living room, FBI digital forensics experts had gained access to the officers' text message groups. Sir, you need to see this, technical analyst Sarah Johnson called to Elijah, displaying a screen showing hundreds of messages between Conrad Brennan and other officers. They have a dedicated group called Neighborhood Integrity, where they coordinate enforcement actions specifically targeting minority residents. The messages revealed explicit racial language and deliberate targeting strategies. Got another one trying to move into Lakeside. Time for special welcome protocol. Williams sector clear of undesirables this month. Property values holding steady. Jenkins says new target at 412 Oakwood. Owner profile matches displacement protocol. Each message documented systematic discrimination operating under color of law. Simultaneously, another team had accessed the department's internal database through proper federal channels, revealing disturbing statistical patterns. Agent Reynolds' analysis confirms enforcement actions in Westlake Estates are 840% higher for minority residents compared to white residents, with identical circumstances, reported statistical analyst James Wilson. Traffic stops, code enforcement, and suspicious person investigations all show similar disparities across all precincts under Conrad's influence. While this evidence was being compiled, Agent Chen discovered attempts to remotely delete records from police servers. Someone's trying to purge the system, she announced, triggering an immediate response from FBI cyber specialists who traced the deletion attempts to Assistant Chief Wilson's personal device. He's working from a remote location attempting to eliminate database records of selective enforcement, confirmed cyber specialist Alex Rivera. We're capturing everything in real time, including his deletion attempts, which constitute additional federal charges of evidence tampering. Elijah's specialized team, working from secured laptops, began uncovering financial connections that pointed to corruption far beyond racial targeting. Sir, we've identified unusual payment patterns between the department's asset forfeiture fund and several city officials. Financial analyst Rebecca Morrison reported, displaying complex transaction records. There appears to be a systematic diversion of seized assets through shell companies connected to both Wilson and Conrad, with smaller distributions to officers participating in targeted enforcement actions. This financial trail led to an even more disturbing discovery when cross-referenced with property records. The pattern is clear, Morrison continued. Enforcement actions increase dramatically in neighborhoods where minority homeownership rises above 15%. Within 6 months of increased police activity, property sales by minority owners spike, with most properties purchased by corporate entities connected to Walter Sullivan and 4 development companies. Internal affairs records obtained through federal warrants revealed dozens of civil rights complaints systematically buried by department leadership. Every complaint filed by a minority resident of Westlake Estates was classified as unfounded, without investigation, reported Agent Torres, reviewing the internal documents. The reviewing officer on 87% of those dismissed complaints was Sergeant Conrad, with Assistant Chief Wilson signing off on the remainder. By midday, forensic accountants had traced offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, connected to both Jenkins and Sullivan, with regular deposits corresponding to property turnovers in Westlake Estates and similar neighborhoods. They've been running a systematic operation to maintain racial homogeneity in upscale neighborhoods by using police harassment to drive out minority homeowners, then profiting from the resulting property sales, summarized financial crime specialist David Cohen. The investigation took an even darker turn when FBI technical specialists discovered unauthorized surveillance equipment in Elijah's home installed before his arrival. These aren't standard commercial systems, confirmed technical specialist Lisa Jung, displaying tiny cameras found in light fixtures and air vents. This is professional-grade equipment registered to a private security company owned by Gerald Jenkins. They were monitoring Agent Reynolds from day one. Perhaps most disturbing was the discovery that the department had developed formalized procedures for targeting minority homeowners. A secured folder on Conrad's department laptop, accessed through federal warrant, contained a document titled Property Value Protection Protocols, with explicit instructions for selective enforcement, pretextual stops, and escalation. Strategies designed to create maximum discomfort for targeted residents without generating actionable civil rights claims. The sophistication of this operation suggests long-term development and implementation, Elijah noted during a briefing with his team. This isn't isolated misconduct, but an institutionalized system operating across multiple jurisdictions. As these revelations accumulated, District Attorney Michael Hamilton arrived at the scene, demanding to speak with the FBI leadership. "This is a local matter that falls under my jurisdiction," Hamilton insisted to Agent Chen, who had met him at the perimeter established around Elijah's property. "Any evidence collected needs to be turned over to my office immediately." His aggressive stance shifted noticeably when Elijah emerged from the house. "District Attorney Hamilton, your name appears 17 times in the financial records we've recovered specifically in connection with dismissed civil rights cases involving Officers Brennan and Conrad. Elijah stated calmly. "I believe that creates a significant conflict of interest in your assertion of jurisdiction." Hamilton's face flushed as he backed toward his car without further comment. By late afternoon, Elijah held a secure video conference with FBI Director Morgan, bringing him up to speed on the rapidly expanding investigation. What began as Operation Clean House has uncovered a multi-jurisdictional criminal enterprise operating within several police departments, coordinating with private entities to systematically violate civil rights for financial gain, Elijah reported, displaying slides summarizing the evidence collected. "We've identified at least 23 officers, 7 current and former commanders, and 12 private citizens operating in an organized conspiracy. The most damning evidence came from Elijah's own comprehensive security system, which had captured conversations between officers when they believed they weren't being recorded. One particularly incriminating video showed Officers Brennan and Williams in Elijah's kitchen discussing planting evidence. "If we don't find anything worth seizing, use the package from Conrad's desk," Brennan had instructed. "Same as we did in the Westview case last month." This explicit reference to previous misconduct opened avenues to review dozens of past cases for similar violations. As officers began turning against each other, when confronted with evidence, the full scope of Operation Clean House became clear to those caught in its web. What had appeared to be a simple case of racial profiling was actually the carefully planned triggering event for one of the largest police corruption investigations in the department's history. Do you believe systematic corruption like this exists in real police departments across America? Comment number 1, if you think this level of organized misconduct is realistic, or number 2, if you believe these are just isolated incidents. Like this video if you support federal oversight of local police departments with pattern and practice investigations, and subscribe to follow more stories of justice being served. How will the corrupt officers and officials respond when they realized the true scale of evidence against them and what desperate measures might they take to avoid the consequences of their actions. Let's continue with the next shocking chapter in this unfolding investigation. By morning, the police department's response had shifted from individual denials to coordinated resistance, as Thomas Grant, chief counsel for the police union, arrived at Elijah's residence flanked by 3 associate attorneys, carrying multiple briefcases. "I'm here to represent all officers involved in this matter," Grant announced, forcefully attempting to push past the FBI perimeter. "Any questioning of department personnel must go through me, effective immediately." Agent Chen intercepted him with professional courtesy that barely masked her firm stance. "Counselor, your clients are witnesses in a federal corruption investigation. They're free to consult with you, but our jurisdiction is established, and questioning will proceed according to federal protocols." Behind the scenes, more sinister countermeasures were already in motion. Elijah's secure phone received an alert from FBI Technical Services. Anonymous threats had been directed at 3 neighbors who had provided witness statements supporting Elijah's account of the initial incident. The Miller family received a call warning them to reconsider their statement if they want to remain safe in the neighborhood, reported protection specialist Robert Jackson. "We've established surveillance on their residence and are tracing the calls." Local media outlets suddenly shifted their coverage, with 3 major stations running nearly identical segments questioning the FBI's invasion of local law enforcement jurisdiction. The coordinated messaging suggested organized pressure rather than independent reporting. Channel 5's primary advertiser is Westlake Development Group, owned by Sullivan's brother-in-law, information specialist Tanya Reeves, discovered after brief research. Channels 8 and 12 both have exclusive advertising contracts with businesses connected to Assistant Chief Wilson's family trust. The counteroffensive escalated when Mayor Gregory Williams called a press conference on the steps of City Hall, flanked by Commissioner Lawrence Davis and several city council members. This federal overreach into local policing is unacceptable and potentially unconstitutional, Williams declared to assembled reporters. "Our officers were responding to legitimate community concerns when they were ambushed by this federal operation. We're filing emergency motions to restrict FBI access to our officers and department records." What the mayor didn't mention, but FBI financial analysts had already documented, were the irregular payments from police forfeiture funds to consulting companies owned by his brother and son-in-law. More disturbingly, witnesses who had initially come forward began reporting intimidation tactics. "Someone spray-painted snitch on my garage door," Sarah Miller reported shakily over the phone to Agent Chen. "And my husband was followed by an unmarked police car all the way to his office this morning." Similar reports came from other cooperative witnesses, creating a pattern of intimidation that only strengthened the federal case while revealing the scope of the conspiracy. Elijah's property became the next target when he returned from a brief meeting at the FBI field office to find racist graffiti spray-painted across his front door and garage. Property damage escalates their charges from intimidation to hate crimes, Elijah noted calmly as evidence technicians photographed the vandalism, and they've been kind enough to provide DNA samples in the process. Technical sweeps of Elijah's residence revealed new surveillance attempts with directional microphones aimed at his home office from a utility van parked 1 block away. Department resources being used for counter-surveillance against federal agents, noted technical specialist Zhang as the team disabled the unauthorized equipment. That's at least 3 additional federal violations. The opposition's strategy shifted to legal maneuvers when FBI agents discovered attempts to plant false evidence in Elijah's FBI personnel file. "Someone accessed your records through an administrative terminal at City Hall," reported cybersecurity specialist Rivera. "They attempted to insert fabricated complaints and performance issues dating back 3 years." The clumsy effort had triggered automatic security protocols, not only preventing the tampering, but identifying the source terminal registered to Assistant Chief Wilson's executive assistant. Pressure intensified when Commissioner Davis leveraged political connections to temporarily suspend Elijah's security clearance pending review of operational protocols. Though transparent in its motivation, the procedural move created brief administrative hurdles that Elijah's team worked around by transferring operational authority to Agent Chen while maintaining Elijah's investigative role. The coordinated resistance extended to physical intimidation when all FBI vehicles parked near the command center were vandalized, overnight tires slashed, and windshields broken, despite the presence of visible security. Simultaneously, agents reported being followed by unmarked vehicles when traveling between locations, obvious surveillance meant to disrupt operations rather than gather intelligence. The most concerning escalation came when Agent Chen reported threatening calls to her parents' home in San Francisco. The caller knew details about my family that aren't public information, she reported to Elijah during their morning briefing. They're accessing restricted databases to gather personal information for intimidation purposes. District Attorney Hamilton, after his initial retreat, returned with aggressive legal maneuvers, filing motions to block federal access to department records based on ongoing local investigations that could be compromised. Judge Catherine Morrison, reviewing the emergency filings, recused herself after FBI financial analysts identified connections between her husband's real estate company and Sullivan's development group. They're activating every connection in their network, observed legal specialist James Wilson. The corruption extends throughout the municipal infrastructure. The opposition's most elaborate countermeasure emerged when local news outlets simultaneously reported allegations that Elijah himself was under investigation for evidence tampering related to previous cases. Sources within the department have provided documents suggesting Agent Reynolds falsified evidence in at least 3 previous corruption cases, reported Channel 5's evening anchor without specifying the sources or documents referenced. This coordinated attack triggered FBI protocols for protecting agent reputation with the director's office, issuing an immediate statement supporting Elijah and confirming his exemplary record. More significantly, forensic analysis of the department's internal messaging system revealed the fabrication of the false narrative in real time. We have Conrad instructing media affairs to create doubt about the Fed's credibility 17 hours before the first report aired, confirmed digital forensics specialist Johnson. The entire smear campaign is documented in their own communications. Property records examined by the expanding investigative team revealed a disturbing pattern connecting the conspiracy's financial motivation to demographic engineering. 5 development companies connected to Sullivan and Jenkins have purchased 28 properties from minority homeowners following intensive police enforcement actions, reported analyst Morrison. In each case, the properties were quickly resold to white buyers at an average markup of $72,000. Jenkins' role expanded beyond initial understanding when FBI surveillance captured him organizing a community meeting at his home, attended by 15 Westlake residents. He's portraying Reynolds as part of a federal conspiracy to devalue neighborhood properties by forcing integration, reported surveillance specialist Thomas Lee, who had established observation posts covering key locations. He's essentially admitting the discriminatory intent, while framing it as property value protection. The escalation took its most dangerous turn when Elijah's security system detected 3 armed individuals attempting to access his property through a wooded area at the rear boundary at 2:15 in the morning. Initial assessment suggests hired contractors rather than department personnel, reported tactical response leader Michael Garcia, after the individuals were intercepted and detained by FBI agents. They're carrying unregistered weapons and professional-grade tools consistent with contracted intimidation or elimination. Interrogation of these subjects revealed connections to a security company previously employed by Jenkins during his tenure as police chief, suggesting an attempt to eliminate Elijah disguised as a home invasion. While these countermeasures intensified, evidence tampering at police headquarters was discovered through embedded FBI technical assets. They're systematically destroying records related to Westlake Estates enforcement actions, reported Agent Torres. Fortunately, we secured complete server backups before they initiated deletion protocols. The most significant revelation came when financial analysis connected the conspiracy to systematic efforts spanning 2 decades. This isn't isolated to Westlake, financial specialist Cohen reported during an emergency briefing. We've identified 7 other neighborhoods with identical patterns of enforcement, property turnover, and development profit. The total financial impact exceeds $30 million since 2005. Sullivan's role expanded beyond initial assumptions when FBI agents discovered his previous identity as an undercover officer who had worked with extremist groups before his retirement 15 years earlier. He maintained connections to organizations advocating neighborhood purity, while presenting himself as merely concerned with property values, reported background specialist Rebecca Johnson. His HOA presidency provided perfect cover for coordinating discriminatory practices under the guise of community standards enforcement. As these desperate countermeasures accumulated, they only strengthened the federal case while revealing the true scope of the conspiracy that had operated unchecked for years before Elijah's carefully planned operation brought it into the light. Despite his temporary security clearance suspension, Elijah continued working from a secure FBI facility established 10 miles from Westlake Estates, coordinating the rapidly expanding investigation that now encompassed multiple jurisdictions and dozens of subjects. The encryption on Conrad's personal devices has been breached, reported technical analyst Johnson, displaying a screen filled with messages dating back 7 years. We've recovered communication between Conrad Wilson and Jenkins establishing systematic targeting protocols for what they termed demographic management across 8 residential zones. These communications revealed explicit racial motivations behind enforcement patterns, with officers instructed to apply different standards based solely on resident demographics. Citations for white residents show a 78% warning rate versus only 4% for black residents with identical violations. Statistical analyst Wilson confirmed after reviewing 5 years of enforcement data. Perhaps most disturbing was the pattern of civil asset forfeitures targeting minority-owned properties. When property owners couldn't pay accumulating fines or afford legal representation, the department initiated forfeiture proceedings, explained legal specialist Torres. The properties were then purchased at auction by companies connected to Sullivan and Jenkins, creating a perfect mechanism for demographic displacement while generating profit. Security footage from Elijah's comprehensive system provided the investigation's most compelling evidence, capturing Wilson and Jenkins on his property at 3:27 in the morning, 2 days before the confrontation, appearing to plant unknown items near his garage. They were establishing pretext for future enforcement. Elijah observed as the team reviewed the footage, creating justification for the raid they already planned. This physical evidence of conspiracy transformed the case from pattern inference to documented criminal conspiracy. Testimony from previous victims strengthened the prosecution foundation, with 15 former Westlake residents describing identical experiences of police harassment following home purchases. After 3 months of daily police visits, vandalism, and citations, we couldn't take it anymore, recounted former resident Michael Johnson in a recorded statement. We sold at a 20% loss just to escape the harassment. No one would help us fight it. The conspiracy's protective wall began crumbling when junior officers, recognizing the overwhelming evidence against them, began providing testimony in exchange for consideration. Officer Thomas Williams has provided written confirmation that Conrad personally instructed his unit to make life uncomfortable for undesirable elements in targeted neighborhoods, reported Agent Chen during the morning briefing. He's identified 17 other officers who received similar instructions. Jenkins' role as conspiracy coordinator became clear when financial records revealed his private security company received monthly payments from Sullivan's development group, coded as Community Preservation Services. He effectively monetized his police connections to maintain neighborhood demographic composition, explained financial specialist Cohen, creating a business model from institutional racism. Elijah narrowly escaped a second attempt on his safety when his FBI security detail identified a sabotage attempt on his vehicle, disguised to appear as mechanical failure that would have caused a high-speed crash. Professional-level tampering with brake lines and steering components, confirmed vehicle specialist Rodriguez after examination, designed to activate after reaching highway speeds. The final crucial evidence piece emerged from Assistant Chief Wilson's offshore financial records obtained through federal warrants served on banking institutions in 3 countries. Accounts in the Cayman Islands, Singapore, and Liechtenstein contain a combined $11.4 million, reported international financial specialist Patel. Transaction patterns align perfectly with property turnovers in targeted neighborhoods following enforcement actions. As the evidence chain neared completion, Conrad attempted to flee the jurisdiction, booking a private flight to Mexico using a recently established alias. FBI surveillance, already monitoring all potential escape routes, intercepted him at a small private airfield 30 miles outside Atlanta. He had $600,000 in cash and documentation for a property purchase in Belize, reported apprehension team leader Garcia. Clear evidence of flight to avoid prosecution. Jenkins' desperate document destruction attempt similarly failed when FBI agents executing a search warrant at his residence discovered him burning files in his backyard fire pit. Digital recovery specialists were able to reconstruct partial documents from ashes and fragments, reported evidence specialist Zhang, including what appears to be a neighborhood preservation manual with explicit instructions for targeting minority homeowners. The most significant breakthrough in understanding the conspiracy's scope came when District Attorney Hamilton's involvement was fully documented through financial records showing regular payments from Sullivan's Development Company to Hamilton's brother's consulting firm. Hamilton dismissed 23 civil rights complaints against Conrad's unit in the past 36 months. Legal specialist Wilson confirmed after reviewing court records. Each dismissal correlates with a $15,000 payment to his brother's company within 10 days. With the evidence chain now complete and virtually unbreakable, FBI Director Morgan authorized full operational resources for the final phase. This operation has uncovered one of the most extensive civil rights conspiracies in recent history, the director noted during a secure video conference with Elijah and his team. The coordinated action will proceed at 0400 tomorrow. Elijah presented the final operational plan to his expanded team, now numbering over 70 federal agents and specialists. The evidence establishes a criminal enterprise operating under color of law to systematically violate civil rights for financial gain, he summarized, displaying a complex organizational chart on the command center's main screen. Tomorrow's coordinated action will simultaneously apprehend all 47 identified conspirators across multiple jurisdictions. The plan's precision reflected Elijah's meticulous attention to detail, with teams assigned to each target and comprehensive evidence packages prepared for immediate filing with federal prosecutors. As final preparations continued, a trusted colleague from the police department's Internal Affairs Division, Detective Sarah Rodriguez, approached Elijah with information about additional conspirators. However, surveillance footage later revealed her entering Assistant Chief Wilson's office immediately after leaving the FBI command center, exposing an attempt to gather intelligence on the impending operation. Her betrayal actually strengthens our case by confirming the conspiracy extends into internal affairs, Elijah noted when informed of the discovery. Add her to the primary target list. The final evidence component cementing the case beyond any reasonable doubt came from Elijah's home security system, which had captured conversations between Conrad Wilson and Jenkins inside his residence during the illegal search. Once we get him out, Sullivan's people can move in immediately. Conrad had stated, unaware of the recording. Same premium as the Harrison property last year. Wilson had responded, the mayor wants this one handled quickly. Too visible to let it drag out. This explicit recording of criminal conspiracy, involving the highest levels of city government and law enforcement, provided the irrefutable evidence needed for the comprehensive federal case that would begin with tomorrow's coordinated arrests. The synchronized operation began precisely at 4 a.m, with 27 separate FBI teams executing arrest warrants simultaneously across the greater Atlanta area. Elijah, reinstated with full authority following Director Morgan's personal intervention, led the primary team targeting Assistant Chief Wilson at his lakeside mansion. FBI search warrant. Announced Tactical Team Leader Garcia as entry teams breached Wilson's front door, finding the Assistant Chief attempting to delete files from his home computer. Robert Wilson, you're under arrest for conspiracy against rights, corruption under color of law, and obstruction of justice. Elijah stated, formally personally applying handcuffs to the man who had authorized his mistreatment 5 days earlier. Across town, Officer Brennan was taken into custody while preparing for his patrol shift, the shock evident on his face as FBI agents surrounded him in the police locker room. This must be some mistake, Brennan protested, as agents secured him. I was just following orders. Similar scenes played out across the city as Conrad Miller Jenkins, Sullivan Hamilton, Mayor Williams, and 40 other conspirators were simultaneously arrested in a massive operation involving over 100 federal agents. By dawn, all 47 targets were in federal custody, with national news crews capturing footage of the handcuffed officials being escorted into the federal courthouse. The scale of the operation and the prominence of those arrested generated immediate media attention across the country. Breaking news this morning as FBI agents have arrested dozens of Atlanta officials, including the Assistant Police Chief District Attorney and Mayor, in what's being described as one of the largest civil rights conspiracy cases in the Atlanta. Decades, reported the CNN anchor, as helicopter footage showed the coordinated processing of suspects. The evidence presented during initial court appearances was overwhelming, with prosecutors displaying financial records, communication logs, and video evidence establishing the conspiracy beyond reasonable doubt. The defendants systematically violated constitutional rights for personal financial gain, using police authority to drive minority residents from desirable neighborhoods, stated U.S. Attorney Jennifer Phillips during the initial hearing. The evidence includes explicit recordings of the defendants planning and executing this criminal enterprise. Officer Brennan, facing the most serious charges due to his direct role in Elijah's assault, broke down during his arraignment. "I was just doing what Conrad and Wilson told us was department policy," he claimed through tears. "The training specifically instructed us to apply different standards in preservation zones like Westlake." His unintentional confirmation of discriminatory policies only strengthened the prosecution's case. During a press conference following the arrests, FBI Director Morgan revealed the operation's true genesis. Operation Clean Sweep began 14 months ago, when statistical analysis identified unusual enforcement patterns in specific Atlanta neighborhoods, the director explained. Special Agent Reynolds volunteered for the dangerous assignment of placing himself in the target environment to trigger and document the conspiracy's operations. This revelation transformed public perception of the case, with Elijah emerging as a dedicated agent who had willingly placed himself in harm's way to expose systematic injustice. The federal consent decree implemented in the wake of the arrests fundamentally restructured Atlanta's police department, establishing independent oversight, mandatory civil rights training, and statistical monitoring of enforcement patterns. This agreement will ensure that law enforcement serves all citizens equally, regardless of race or economic status, announced Attorney General Richard Barnes during the signing ceremony. The systematic abuses uncovered in this investigation will never again be permitted to take root. As the criminal proceedings advanced, the evidence proved insurmountable for the defendants. Jenkins' detailed records of the neighborhood preservation scheme recovered during the searches outlined a 20-year history of coordinated discrimination. The document explicitly states their goal of maintaining desirable demographic composition through selective enforcement against non-traditional residents, explained Prosecutor Phillips during preliminary hearings. The community impact extended beyond criminal justice, with property records in previously restricted neighborhoods showing increasing diversity as artificial barriers fell. 6 new families of color have purchased homes in Westlake Estates in the past month alone, reported the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Residents describe a neighborhood transformation as the invisible walls constructed by corrupt officials have been dismantled. Despite the traumatic circumstances of his arrival in Westlake Estates, Elijah made the surprising decision to remain in his home. Abandoning this property would mean they partially succeeded, he explained during an interview with the Washington Post. "My presence here represents the rule of law overcoming corruption and discrimination." The neighborhood itself began a healing process with community reconciliation meetings establishing open dialogue about the biases that had allowed the conspiracy to flourish. Sarah and David Miller, who had shown Elijah kindness from the beginning, organized a neighborhood diversity committee. "We were silent for too long about the obvious discrimination happening around us." Sarah acknowledged during a community meeting. "That silence made us complicit in the injustice our neighbors experienced." The most significant professional outcome for Elijah came with his promotion to lead the FBI's new National Task Force on Systematic Discrimination, a unit specifically designed to identify and address similar patterns nationwide. "What we uncovered in Atlanta exists in various forms across the country," Elijah explained during the task force announcement. "Our mission is to ensure equal protection under law isn't just a constitutional phrase but a lived reality for every American." 6 months after the dramatic arrests, Elijah hosted a neighborhood cookout on his front lawn, the same location where he had once been handcuffed and humiliated. The gathering included a diverse group of new Westlake residents, along with long-standing neighbors who had rejected the discriminatory practices of the past. "This community is demonstrating what America should be," Elijah told the assembled neighbors. "A place where your rights don't depend on your race or background, but are guaranteed by law and respected by those sworn to uphold it." His new security cameras, still maintaining vigilant watch over his property, now captured very different images than those that had launched the landmark case. Children of all backgrounds playing together on his lawn, former antagonists, engaged in respectful conversation, and a community slowly healing from the corruption that had divided it. As evening fell, Elijah sat alone on his front porch, watching the transformed neighborhood with quiet satisfaction. The journey from targeted victim to justice catalyst had been difficult and dangerous, but the results surrounding him confirmed its value. Where once he had faced hostility and discrimination, he now witnessed the community that could exist when justice prevailed over prejudice and corruption. The Westlake Estates transformation represented a small but significant victory in the much larger struggle for equal justice that remained his life's work. What do you think about the power of federal oversight to address systematic discrimination in local police departments? Has this story changed your perspective on the importance of accountability at all levels of law enforcement? Comment below with your thoughts, and don't forget to like this video if you believe justice should be applied equally, regardless of race or background. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of corruption exposed and justice restored, and share this video with someone who needs to understand the ongoing fight for civil rights in America. Thank you for watching this incredible true story of courage, persistence, and the triumph of justice over entrenched corruption. This story powerfully illustrates how racial discrimination can become institutionalized within systems meant to protect all citizens equally. Elijah's experience reveals the dangerous intersection of prejudice, power, and profit that can corrupt law enforcement and local government. When authorities abuse their power based on racial bias, they betray their oath to protect and serve, undermining the very foundation of justice. The conspiracy exposed in Westlake Estates demonstrates how racism often has economic motivations, with property values and development profits driving discriminatory practices. It shows that racial profiling isn't merely about individual biases, but can be part of coordinated efforts to maintain segregated communities. The story highlights the importance of federal oversight when local institutions fail to police themselves, and how dedicated individuals working within the system can expose and dismantle corrupt networks. Elijah's strategic patience and documentation of violations ultimately brought down an entire corrupt system. His decision to remain in his home after the ordeal symbolizes the importance of standing firm against intimidation and claiming spaces where one rightfully belongs. Most importantly, the community's transformation reminds us that healing and progress are possible. When discrimination is confronted, openly corrupt systems are dismantled, and people commit to building truly inclusive communities based on justice and mutual respect. What systems of injustice exist in your community that need to be exposed? Have you ever witnessed racial profiling or discrimination that went unchallenged? Comment below with your thoughts or experiences. If you believe in equal justice under law for all Americans regardless of race, hit that like button to stand with Elijah and countless others fighting similar battles every day. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that expose corruption and celebrate those brave enough to confront it. Share this video with someone who needs to understand the reality of modern discrimination and the importance of speaking up against injustice. Thank you for joining us in this important conversation about race, power, and accountability in America. Together we can build communities where everyone is truly protected and served equally by those sworn to uphold the law.